He's starting the recording.
All right, Peter, take it away.
Thank you, Jimmy. Hello again. My name is Peter Cassiano, for those of you who don't know me, and I am the finance chair of the Charles Coiner Conservancy for Urban Farming. We're pleased to bring to you tonight the third installment of our urban homesteading summer series. Our third installment is going to be on root cellar storage. And so that's the canning, preservation, storing of root vegetables or other items that are known to be good storers. So we think that you'll enjoy the program we have prepared for you today. I'm a partner of a Silver Spring law firm, and when they were asked to be a sponsor of this summer series, we were really honored. We jumped at the chance, frankly. Personally, I think I am the newest board member, and I can say for certain that it's a group that I'm honored to be a part of. Everybody is so innovative, thoughtful, generous, and it really does go back to CKC Farming's mission. And their mission is to preserve and manage urban farms. Their goal is to do that so that they can inspire the next generation of innovative and sustainable food advocates. They plan to do that inspiration through a hands-on, farm-based educational approach. And that's the principle that guides all of us, frankly, to do what we do. And so I'd be remiss right now if I didn't thank everybody who has participated so far, who of course has given money so far. You've really turned this summer series into a success, and you've inspired us to do more of these events, to put on more events in the future. So please look forward to those because we're excited to do that. Before we turn to the content, to Hannah Shoulder, who's going to go over the ins and outs of urban root cellar storage, what we've done is we've prepared a video for you to give you a sense of what life is like on the farm, since under the current situation, it's not always easy or appropriate for folks to come down. So we've prepared this video for you to get a sense of what it's like, and for you to see the volunteers and customers and neighbors that that we're so lucky to have. So please enjoy this video.
Hi, I'm Frida Wiley. I live in the area, and I would take walks like everybody, especially now during the pandemic, and strolling through, I would see the farm, but at the time I just thought it was maybe like a large family owned plot, and I could never catch anybody. And so I met up with one of my friends who also lives in the area shortly after I moved here, and I said, you know, there's this great place that I really would like to maybe just see if I could hang out. And he started telling me about it. He's like, oh yeah, you know, I've met the owner. She's a really nice lady. You should definitely go talk to them and ask. I'm sure they'd be happy to have you. And so I went and I looked it up on the website, and I saw that you guys were taking volunteers. So it was just a great gift, because I don't even have a balcony. So it was a bit of an adjustment to come here and be used to being outside every day, every morning earthing, and every morning doing yoga in the grass. And I don't even have a balcony for fresh air. So it really means a lot to be able to come here and to be in nature. There are so many animals, like you'll see, you know, squirrels, and the bird watching is amazing. And it's just like a mecca. I do have some farming experience, but it's from a long time ago. So when I was a little girl, my parents had a garden in the backyard, and then my mom's family actually had like a small ranch / farm. But with that, I was mainly, when I would go to visit my grandparents, I was mainly helping to feed the farm animals, because, you know, when you're a kid, that's the fun part. You're not really into the plants as much, maybe. So yeah, I've developed an appreciation, but you know, now I'm kind of learning new tricks and relearning things that I'd forgotten. I'm really a big proponent of giving back to the community, and it's really like a double blessing, because I'm not only able to come here and have like my little peace and my moment of peace, but I'm also able to give back to the community. And like you said, especially during a time of need. So that's really important to me. And I feel very good to be able to do that. I would tell people who are interested in volunteering to come check out the farm. And if you happen to see volunteers, feel free to stop by, because people here are super friendly and they're happy to talk to you. And also to check out the website, because that was actually how I found out about the farm taking volunteers.
Do you think you're going to continue through the fall?
If you'll let me, I'm coming.
Hi, my name is Kate Medina. I am the Executive Director of the Charles Coiner Conservancy. I'm here at Coiner Farm in downtown Silver Spring, and if you're interested in volunteering, please feel free to visit our website, www.ckcfarming.org, and go to the volunteership page. We also offer internships if you're in high school or college, and we'd love to have you join us. There's an application online, and I hope to hear from you. Thanks.
As you can see from that short video, we are super lucky to be supported by the neighbors and volunteers that we have. Key takeaway, please bookmark the website and return to it often, because we try to post news, events, and updates on our website. So please connect with us there. It's critical for us to have the support of our neighbors and surrounding members. One of those members produced that video, and he is in charge of and responsible for a lot of the visual content that comes from the farm, Vinny Muano. And we just want to say thanks to Vinny and mention him for all the great work that he does to highlight the farm. For us, it's very important work that we're doing, and we just want to extend again a thank you to everybody who's joined. Now that our seminar is coming to a close, we really ask you and implore you really to take some of the materials that we've generated and that we send you, whether it's the recording of these events or just letting people know about what's going on at the farm. That kind of growth, that organic, natural growth, is what is really going to sustain us and is key to our success. So please think of us moving forward. Before I turn it over to Hannah, who, for those of you that have been a part of these in the past, the last two events, know how special she is and how good this is going to be. But before I do that, I want to also just say to you, again, please ask questions in the chat box. We'll try to process those, and as time allows, pass them along to Hannah for her answers. And the other thing to remember is that we're going to be sending you a one-page summary of the content of this event, and we're going to do that to all registrants after the event. So please look for that. That's enough from me. What I'll do now is turn it over to Hannah, who will educate us as to urban root cellar storage. Take it away, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Peter. Welcome everyone to my basement, my humble basement. So as you can tell, we're out of the kitchen now from the past two sessions. And that's because today's topic, as Peter has already explained, is looking at the final preservation technique of how the best conditions for storing fresh vegetables all winter long. So again, just to recap what we've done so far in the series, in the springtime, we were looking at those springtime herbs and how to dry those herbs and some of the early fruits. So that was our fruit leather and again, dried pieces of fruits. Summertime, it was really the ideal moment to look at canning and pickling for all the soft summer veggies, the cukes and the tomatoes, zucchinis. And now that it's fall time, we're looking at what's out in the field, which by design, natural design, are crops that store really well all winter long outside the refrigerator. You really don't need fridge storage. So we're thinking about the winter squash, pumpkins, potatoes, garlic, onions, and then your root vegetables. So it's the carrots, parsnips, turnips, and beets. There's also crops that interestingly stay really well right out in the field. You don't even have to take them out of the field during the winter time. They can withstand a little bit of the snow and cold freezing conditions. So that's the kales and collards. And so when you come to the farm, as it continues to get cold, you'll see all of those items growing actively. So traditionally, those good stores were kept in root cellars. And this is something, a root cellar is something that was like dug into the basement of a home, right into the dirt or into a hillside. And so the root cellars naturally stay cold and have the right humidity conditions for a lot of those crops to stay fresh all winter long. But these days, you know, most of us live in very, very urban areas. Probably most homes do not have root cellars anymore. I think the closest we'll find is something like mine, which is a unfinished basement. And so, you know, again, because of electricity, we've kind of lost touch with our ability to store outside of the, you know, refrigerator. But, you know, there's different ways that we can recreate the conditions right here in a basement or in a cold room in your house, in a garage. So that's what we're gonna cover today. So there are some common conditions for all different types of storing vegetables. And so we're gonna go over those first, and then we're gonna look particularly into the humidity and temperature conditions, which differ per crop. So some of the core conditions are darkness. You can see here in my basement, I actually have a big window. And so what I'm gonna do is cover that window with a sheet. And when my lights are off, this is actually a really nice dark storage space. And of course, that's good to prevent sprouting. So, you know, the potatoes, the garlics, oftentimes get those little green sprouts. And, you know, just to prevent that from happening too soon, keep it nice and dark. Another key condition is going to be ventilation. So in it, whether again, it's a basement or a closet or the garage, you don't want it to be too stuffy. So you're going to not only be thinking about the actual room and space, but the items that you're using to store within. So like a basket, you would want to make sure it has some little cracks or breathable material. You don't want it to be like a tightly sealed, you know, plastic Tupperware. That will just lead to probably some molding and not good conditions. Also, you know, again, there's certain things that do really well when you hang them. Another key general condition is, again, when you're thinking about your storage containers, if you have animals around, you know, little mice, maybe something bigger, and you're a little bit nervous about that, you're gonna look for containers that have lids. But again, to kind of keep the storage conditions right, you know, again, you're gonna have a little bit of that ventilation, but make sure the cracks are no larger than 1/4 of an inch. Otherwise, probably a little mouse could get in there. Hopefully there won't be any mice around, especially again, if it's in your house anyways. So yeah, animal proofing, ventilation, darkness. And then the final kind of common core condition is going to be the way you select your vegetables. So you want to make sure, whether it's a squash or an onion, that it's not cut and bruised, you know, that the flesh is nicely intact. Your stems are intact if it has a stem, nice and hard. Again, if it has little cuts on it, probably going to have a rapid deterioration. For example, here I got this acorn squash out of our field the other day, and you can see it actually does have a little bit of a break, a crack. Maybe that was an animal or something else. Honestly, this would be perfectly fine to cook and eat right away, but I would not keep this in my root cellar for very long. Otherwise, it may attract animals or again, just deteriorate quickly. Yeah, that's it. So to jump into it, again, there's really one more key thing to keep in mind, or two more key things, temperature and humidity. And there's two key categories. You have your vegetables that like kind of medium, moderate, warm temperatures and to keep dry. And then you like there's the ones that like the cool and damp conditions. So the warm and dry ones, those are like your squash and pumpkins, sweet potatoes, onions and garlic, which you can see a lot of them are right here. This basement is kind of perfect conditions in the winter for them. And then the cool and damp conditions, the crops that like this are really like your root vegetables, so the carrots and the beets and the parsnips. And interestingly, like a white potato, it likes it a little bit cooler and damper than a sweet potato. So the warm and dry conditions, let's talk a little bit more about that. So here in Maryland, our winters are relatively mild. And so if you had something like what I have here, an unheated, unfinished basement, it can have like a little, furnace in it that's going on, but it's not it's not actively heated. That would be the ideal condition for, your squash and your onions and your garlic and sweet potatoes. So again, you're thinking about temperatures in the 50s and 60s. And in terms of humidity, dry for a vegetable is actually 60 to 70% relative humidity, which sounds a little bit moist, but for a vegetable that's dry. And so one key thing that I really recommend if you're going to get into this is just getting a temperature and humidity reader. These are like $10, at a hardware store or online. So very nice little gadget to have. If you're actually looking at my numbers, you can tell we're still in summertime here in Maryland, so it's actually quite warm and very, very humid. So this is not the perfect condition for root cellar storage right now. But, again, if I'm going to start storing sooner than later, I can dehumidify the basement. And again, thinking about like rooms in your house that may be a little bit cooler right now, that would be fine. Okay, so thinking again about your squashes and your pumpkins, as we just said, making sure that they're not blemished, that their stems are nice and firm. And there's a concept called curing. So if you're actually getting vegetables out of your garden that you're going to store, you're going to want to make sure that they have been dried and kind of pre-processed out in the field before you bring them into your house for storage. But if you're actually getting stuff from the grocery store and just storing it, for the fun of it, or, again, it's COVID, so we're all thinking about having, good stocks of things. And yeah, more than just the canned goods that we did before, having some fresh things on hand. Pretty much everything you find at the grocery store has already been cured, so kind of pre-dried. But yeah, you want to make sure your squashes are cured. And so sweet potatoes are the same thing, same conditions. And now the difference is something with thick skin, like some of these winter squash and pumpkins. I wouldn't be as worried about them in terms of like the animal-proof containers. I might even actually attempt to leave them right out here on the shelf, which again has nice ventilation as it is, because they've got a nice tough skin on them. But something like a sweet potato, I might put in a basket and then put a lid on this basket or some kind of thick mesh that I hope an animal wouldn't get through, because they might be able to chew right through that softer skin. Okay, so the last item on the kind of warm and dry list, it's the onions and the garlic. So animals typically are not as interested in onions and garlic as you might imagine. Even out in the fields, the deer and the rabbits don't really touch them. They're just too pungent. So kind of same thing goes here in the basement or the closet or the garage. So again, you could leave them in an open crate, and this is perfectly fine. But traditionally what's done with garlic and onions, because they have, big long greens coming out of them when they're in the field, you let those greens dry and you leave them on the plant, and then you can use those to string up your onions and your garlic or braid them and hang them. So just for demonstration purpose, I took a few cloves of garlic with the hard necks and I strung them up there. So just again, it's a space saver, and that's traditionally how it was done. So before I go on to the cold.
Hannah.
Yeah.
Hannah, this is Peter from the farm. I just wanted to ask you a question regarding the garlic.
Yeah.
How long can you typically let it hang like that before the garlic dries out?
Okay, that's a good question. I think typically, we're thinking about like winter storage, so it's not like forever, but a couple months, maybe 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, again, depending on the prime conditions that you've created for storage.
I can usually keep mine until April or May.
There you go. Is that Peter Bixby who just answered?
Yes.
For everyone who's on the call, Peter Bixby is this total wealth of knowledge in terms of food preservation and root cellar storage. So he's been teaching me all week, so I'm extra prepared. Thank you, Peter. Peter Cassiano, are there other questions on the warm and dry conditions before we move on to kind of the root crops, which need that damp, cold condition?
Yes, Hannah, do you have a recommended kind of minimum temperature for how much the basement should be?
Yes. Okay. So, for the squashes and the sweet potatoes, as I said, they kind of like the warmer conditions. So, again, it's not going to be like Maryland summer, but 50s and 60s degrees would be perfect for them. So as it cools down here in the state, that, again, the kind of unheated room will be perfect. But as we're going to get into in a second, for some of the crops that like it colder, so it's your root crops and your white potatoes, they really enjoy 30 degrees. I mean, more than 30 degrees, mid 30s and 40s. Of course, if you leave them out under 32 degrees, that's freezing, and then they won't be very nice at all. So you got to keep it above freezing for those ones.
Thank you.
Sure. Peter, any more questions, or should I move on to the next step?
Well, we do have one question, and I don't know whether it'd be better to take it at the end or now, but how do tomatoes make for good storage vegetables?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's, of course, many things that I'm not mentioning today, like apples, which, probably have memories of seeing those big bushels being stored somewhere. Or, tomatoes. Tomatoes are an interesting one. I would put them like right in the middle of the spectrum. They don't need it super cold and they don't want it super warm. Same thing with the humidity, right in the middle, which, a lot of people store them then in the refrigerator, just kind of in that middle ground. But actually tomatoes do best outside of the fridge, just in terms of the taste and keeping them at their prime condition. But of course, then they don't stay for more than, a couple weeks. And that's why when we had our session earlier, we talked about canning tomatoes, because after a couple weeks, what else you got to do? We have our can from the other week, and we have water bath canned it, so it is ready to go for the winter. It's all sealed up. Cool.
One final question, Hannah. Do you believe that it's possible to store a living strawberry pot in the basement through the winter? Do you think that's possible based on your experience?
Oh my goodness, I haven't even thought about that. So a living strawberry plant. Peter Bixby, can I throw this one to you?
It's probably not worth the effort.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to look into that. So I can totally follow up with you later and do a little bit more digging, but it's a good question. All right, well, let me jump into this next little segment. So we talked about the warm and dry conditions. Now it's the cool and damp. So again, 30s and 40s temperature-wise, and then really high relative humidity for the vegetables, so 80 to 90%. So how to mimic that outside of a traditional root cellar would be something like a closed garage. If your garage is open to the air, it's going to be too cold. I think here in Maryland, it's going to start freezing. But a closed garage, or again, if you have an unfinished basement, if there's a part of the basement that you can vent to the outside, then that would be perfect, because then it'll get nice and cold. So I'm lucky enough here in my basement, I have this kind of semi-finished part with the furnace. And then I have some rooms off under other parts of the house that have dirt floors. And of course, like there's actual little vents to the outside. So I'm going to seal those off so that, the furnace-y, this part stays, 50s and 60s, and that part is going to be, colder and moist because of those dirt floors. But in terms of adding moisture to get to that high humidity level, of course, you could, add a humidifier, literally humidify the room or the garage. And another option is using damp packing materials. So let me demo that, and then we're going to start wrapping up. So here I have this tray, and it has carrots in it, one of our root crops, staple root crop. I have a sawdust, but you could really use any type of packing material. Natural is better. So it could be sand, it could be moss, it could be leaves, but sawdust is really nice and just, again, keeps things simple. So, you go up to your local woodworking shop and just ask them for a bucket. It's literally what we did. So I've got this tray. You can see it's a plastic tray. but the lid that I have for it, I'm going to show you in a second, has a little bit of holes in it, very small holes. So it's going to still, again, have that ventilation. And the way that I would pack it using this method, in the bottom of your tray, you put down about 1 inch of your packing material, and then put down a layer of your root crops. And then we are going to put another layer, another inch of your sawdust, whatever you have. So basically the idea is you don't want the crops bumping up against each other. You want to have these nice even layers. 1 layer of sawdust, 1 layer of carrots, whatever it is, beets, turnips. So I'm going to pack them in there again, like that. Add a little bit more sawdust. And then the final step, which actually you would do after each upper layer of sawdust, take a little spritzer full of water and spray down your sawdust. I think it's better to spray the dust than the carrots themselves. And that's going to create that nice moist environment for them. And then the final thing, because I am going to put this in the part of my basement probably where little mices do scamper around, I'm going to put a lid on top and very DIY, and use some little paper clippy things and clip it on in place. And that's that. And then that's going to go away and stay nice and cold all winter. Whenever we need the crops, we go and grab a few. Yeah, so that's keeping the root crops nice and cold all winter. And as I mentioned before, white potatoes, they do like it a little bit colder than a sweet potato. So here I have them in a little container. And I would probably put these again in the garage or this other unfinished part of my basement. And because, again, I'm a little bit worried about animals, I have a plastic mesh that I put over them. And if this doesn't cut it, then I'll put something a little bit thicker and harder on top. But that's the technique I'm gonna try. And honestly, if you don't have like the right conditions, you know, these potatoes, they can live on the shelf as well. They may get a little bit more wrinkled than the sweet potato, but it's fine. That's all I got. Happy to take a few more questions. And Kate is also gonna close out the program back on the farm. Yeah.
Hannah, I just one thing about the sawdust, it's probably actually easier to get it damp before you start packing. So just put it in a bucket, add water, and get it to the point where if you squeeze it, it doesn't really, not too much water squeezes out, but it feels damp.
I like that, Peter, because you can see I'm like choking on the sawdust dust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing is, when you get your sawdust, make sure that it's not from pressure treated wood.
Okay. Let's see that. Peter Casiano, any more questions coming in on the chat box?
We do not, and we are also out of time. So I think at this point, it'll be to honor all the participants. We'll throw it back to Kate for our final goodbye. So Kate?
Yeah, that's all. I just wanted to sort of wrap things up. I really just, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you all so much for participating in this series. It has meant a lot. It has been so wonderful, and our privilege to welcome you onto the farm each month, albeit virtually. But it has really been such an honor, and we're so thankful for your support, your donations, and we hope that you'll continue with us on this journey. As Peter in the very beginning mentioned, as Peter Casiano in the very beginning mentioned, our mission really is to inspire the next generation of farmers and the next generation of foodies, because the decisions that we make around food and the way that we use the land, that really determines the health of our planet, the future of our planet. And so we encourage you to, if you believe as we do, maybe become a friend of the farm. Some participants already are. Friends of the Farm are sustaining donors, and it starts at $10 a month. If you can do something like that, we'd really appreciate it. I also wanted to extend a big thank you to our board. This series was the board's idea. They made each one happen, and it's a dynamite group of people, so thank you all very much for all of your work to put this on. Each one really went off without much of a hitch, so I'm impressed. And finally, one more thank you, but the last one to Hannah. you have invited us into your kitchen and your basement each month, and you shared with us such wonderful advice and tips and creativity. And I think because of that, we're all a little bit more confident, maybe willing to try new things in the kitchen. So thank you very much for all of the work you put into this. We really appreciate it. I think that's all I have. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. We'll be sending out those one-pagers, so you'll have a little bit more information, and I think the videos will be posted to YouTube as well.
Great program, Hannah and Kate.
Thanks.